Are you a sex worker looking to build a new website or a website redesign? Then you'll want to consider Fox Digital. They did a fantastic job designing my website, Stripped by Sia. If you want your website done, mention that you're a listener of the show at foxdigital.design for 20% off. Tell them I sent ya. Everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, Steph Sia, aka Kimchi on stage. You might know me on there. You might know me on Streamate as Sia on camera. I am also a digital content creator, former sugar baby from many years ago, and I host the show every single week to talk about sex work to hopefully destigmatize the profession, the industry, and hopefully give people a better understanding of what it's like to actually live the life in our shoes. Just because, as we know, our work is highly stigmatized, it is highly judged. There are a lot of assumptions made, lots of sensationalism and glamorization in the media about sex work, but I really like to bring on different guests on every single week to kind of explain their little corner of the adult industry and have some real talk and transparency of what it's actually really like. So that is a little bit about the show, especially if you're brand new here. You're like, what is going on? What is the show about? That is exactly what it's all about. New episodes are here every single Sunday. And first, before we get into this really amazing topic, I'm super stoked. We're talking about sex work in Japan today. And this is a topic that wasn't on my list for this season, but there was a lot of curiosity and interest that came in when I did stumble upon our guest, who I will announce very shortly. But before we get there, I just want to say hello to our lovely Patreon subscribers. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for supporting the show. As you might know, your money goes directly to hosting my website, also to help fund some of my adult industry related events, those kind of trips I get to go to, like expos and the AVNs and stuff like that, because there's still a cost to everything. And yeah, just to kind of build some community and get to know you all as well. And what you can get on there is some video exclusives. You can see this episode usually in video format if we have guests that are consenting to be on video. And yeah, you get pretty much first dibs on everything over there. So I just want to say hello to some of our fans that are on the second and top tier. We'll go from the start. We got Snoo from Germany. We've got Justin Erickson. We've got Ted McGuire, y'all from the States. We've got Geyser, Selena Money, Moxie Mayhem. We've got Eric Rajo, B. York, and Amy Taylor. Thank you so much. And of course, there's so many of you that are on the first tier as well. So thank you so much for your contribution. If you are interested in perhaps financially supporting the show, you're welcome to go check out the Patreon. It's patreon.com/strippedbysia, and you can find out more information there or just message me on Twitter/X, and I'd be happy to answer more questions for you. Also want to say hello to my network, Skyhawk After Dark. If you like podcasts like this or videocasts and you're really interested and invested in the adult industry, then Skyhawk After Dark is a great network that, hosts a lot of shows like mine with guests that you might have heard before. They have their own podcast as well, so feel free to go ahead and support. It's skyhawkafterdarktv.com. And last but not least, I mentioned earlier, some of your funds are going to help host, basically hosting costs and services for my website, strippedbysia.com, which was lovingly made by a friend of mine, Anthony Joe, who helps support sex workers build their websites for them. And he's offering listeners of Stripped by Sia 20% off. So if you're looking for a brand new website, or if you are wanting to maybe rebrand or start fresh or start anew or whatever you want, feel free to go check him out. It's foxdigital.design, and tell him I sent you. All right, so I've managed to get that now under 4 minutes, which is awesome because we need all the time that we can get for this episode. So as I mentioned, we will be talking about sex work in Japan. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of interest in this particular topic. I know a lot of you listeners are based in North America, including myself. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. But I don't know much about sex work in Japan. I know some of the things like host bars. I know like, and I don't know if, and we're going to talk about this later, like maid cafes, are those considered as sex work and stuff like that? But I am bringing on a guest who has worked many years in Japan as a sex worker. Her name is Amina, and she'll be joining us today to talk about all the things. And if you are not familiar with who Amina is, she is an ex-idol in Japan, and we'll talk about what an idol means later on in the show. She's also an advocate for sex worker rights in Japan and in London in the United Kingdom, and is now working at a tech startup for content creators called Mint Stars. And if we have time, I'd love to also talk about that as well. But without further ado, Amina, are you there?
Hi. So happy to be
Hi.
here.
We are so excited to have you. There was so much traction on that post on Twitter. And a lot of people are just like, ooh, what's this? Like sex work in Japan, what's that like? So really happy to bring you on board for today's really juicy topic and just talk about your experience in Japan as a sex worker. But I always like to throw it back to my guest in terms of like, I know a little bit about you, but I always like the guests to kind of give themselves their own introduction as well and define themselves in their own words and terms. So I'm going to throw it back to you. Amina, can you tell us who you are in your own words and terms?
Yes. I am originally from Michigan. And as a teenager, I really got into Japanese pop culture. I studied Japanese, and I ended up getting a contract to work as an idol in Japan, which was a very fun experience to have, in my early 20s, late teen years. But during that time, I started to do sex work, like in secret, basically, in Japan. And I did various forms of it there.
Yeah, for sure. And we are going to get to know all of those details, well, a lot of it at least, and talk about your experience abroad over there. But yeah, why don't we talk about maybe like your entry into sex work, or maybe like talking about what is an idol in Japan? What does that mean? You got a contract there. Maybe start us at the beginning, wherever you feel most comfortable.
Yeah, so I used to make videos in Japanese to practice my Japanese online, and I started to get traction on a Japanese website called Nico Nico Doga, which is kind of like YouTube or Twitch. It's no longer around, but it was pretty popular website in Japan at that time. So I got attention to start to work as an idol, and I loved idols for a long time. For people who don't know what a J-pop idol is essentially kind of like the predecessor to a K-pop idol.
Yes.
They are very cute, or they're very handsome. There can be a boy or a girl. They are usually like a teenager, but they can be like in their 20s, and their fans are usually the opposite gender of them. And it's $1 billion industry.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love that how you describe it, like kind of contrasting it with today's K-pop idols, because that's like obviously very, very huge, and that's its own like culture as well. But yeah, like people fans can go really crazy for these idols too. So it's really cool that you kind of like found yourself there in that kind of world, and kind of like by chance, I would guess.
Yeah, and
So
also
yeah.
very like crazy that I also did sex work at the same time. Like sometimes I look back on that being like 18 and 19, and like I wouldn't change any decision that I've made because it makes me the person that I am, but just like
Mhm.
damn, like I was really doing a lot.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
idols
like,
are supposed to be pure. Sorry to cut you off, but
yes.
I didn't
No,
mention
not
that
at all.
idols are meant to be like pure in Japan,
Mhm.
because their fans like have a parasocial relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and that goes along kind of with the K-pop, idols as well. Like, the way that these management companies kind of manage their idols, yes, it's very pure. It's very, like, untouchable in a sort of way. Um, Kind of innocent in some ways, depending on their branding and stuff, which is super fascinating. But yeah, they definitely have this very concrete image of what an idol should be and what an idol shouldn't be. I was actually really into like a lot of J-pop when I was younger. I don't know if you remember the band Morning Musume.
Yes, yes, I used to love them. Oh my
Still
god.
love them. But yeah, I remember some of the members of this very large J-pop group. there was a lot of controversy because, paparazzi caught like one of them smoking marijuana, and that's like a big no-no. Even like dating and stuff is kind of like, I wouldn't say like looked down upon, but like that's not the image that they are trying to portray for the fans and stuff too. So kind of similar in a way. It's kind of strange from like a Westerner looking at it, but that's something that's really embedded in their culture as well. But sidebar, going back to you, Amina, talking about sex work, talking about idol, like which one came first, or were they kind of simultaneous at the same time, or tell us about
So
that?
I know this is probably problematic, but it's my truth, so I'm gonna own it. When I was in high school, I heard about like doming online, and
Mm-hmm.
I lied about my age and signed up on like a website, and I didn't have like a picture, was not very successful, but I got a couple of Amazon gift cards out of it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like struck a chord with me and got me really into the idea of it, but I hadn't done it until I went to Japan. It
Mm-hmm.
was just online before then.
Yeah, and that's another topic to bring up as well. Like there are, I mean, as much as companies want to deny it, unfortunately, there are preteens, teens going into sex work, and that is a topic I haven't really talked about because I don't know anyone that does that. But I mean, the prospect of getting money when you're young is so exciting,
Mm,
exhilarating. Having your own money that you have worked towards, and then you can choose to spend that however you want it. That's
absolutely.
really appealing, right? As young as youth, we were all young at one point, so like no judgment there. At all. It's a tricky fine line too, especially when you get to that like 18 age,
Yeah,
18, 19 age. Like legal age here in Canada is 19, so there's like a lot of that borderline kind of
yeah,
gray area. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, something to address for sure. But I mean, talking on this podcast a lot, we do talk about a lot of consenting adult work because that's what the work is. Um,
yes.
yes, yes. But, some of us have different histories and past as well. This is your truth. So happy that you were able to share that. But going back to you, tell us about this contract with Idol. Like, were you contracted to work in Japan? Like, how did that work? And then also talk to us about like how that kind of maybe led into more like deeper your sex work.
Yeah, so I got a contract from a talent agency, and the way that it's set up in Japan and Korea, and I think most of Asia, is that they have like a jimusho system where essentially your talent agency takes care of like pretty much everything from you for you, but it's kind of separate than like a record label. Like they would broker the contract between like you and a record label or you appearing on TV or something like that. Whereas in the US, I think it's starting to become like that with the 360 contracts. A lot of like rappers and young like music artists are getting on, but
Mm-hmm.
that's still pretty new. So that's kind of how it was for me. Like I signed a contract and they basically said they owned my likeness, which is kind of how they get around banning you from dating. This is like a big thing in idol
Mm,
culture is that you're not supposed to date.
right.
However, it was ruled like unlawful in Japan because there were some
Mm,
idol groups that actually tried to sue the members because they were caught dating and the fans didn't like that and the group lost revenue. So the court ruled in the girls' favor, obviously, and so that
yeah.
kind of set a precedent. So now
Wow.
contracts say that they own your likeness. So that was kind of what mine said.
Oh, wow. I mean, and yes, you were a minor at this time. Like, were your parents around? Obviously, would they have to sign for you? It's like a guardian, or like, were your parents definitely on board for this? Are you able to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was about 17 when I first got the contract, still in Michigan. And then when I actually moved there, I had just turned 18. My father was totally against it. And we have like other issues, but he was definitely against it. He always wanted me to be serious and like become a
Mm.
doctor or like a lawyer or something. So this is very not what he had in mind for me. And my mom, she has kind of like this hippie sort of person. So, of course, she worried about me. Anybody would worry about their daughter going across the world. But her and my grandmother both said when they were young, all girls they knew wanted to do when they left high school was just to get married. They didn't want to travel, it was just to get married and have a kid. So they were happy that I, wanted something for my life. A
Mhm.
little reluctant, but they did support me. And my mother and aunt came with me to Japan when I first went. And
Wow.
we had a lawyer look at the contract before I signed it. But my mom met the talent agency and everything too.
Mhm. Oh, that's good. So at least you had some support as well. And were your mom and your aunt there entire like were they present for the entire duration of your contract, or just to like help you set up and find your roots in Japan and stuff too? Because like that can be really intimidating as a 17, 18-year old. You're super young, you're like maybe fresh out of high school, and you're like, I'm in a foreign country, literally foreign country, doesn't even speak English. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, that was a lot. So they just helped me set up my dorm because I was in college then too at that
Mm-hmm.
time. So they helped me set up my dorm. They went to my orientation with me. We were on TV, this show in Japan, Why Did You Come to Japan? So they were on TV with me, like, coming around the places and just making sure everything was on the up and up. They loved how
Mm-hmm.
safe it was. So that was really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think about the 3 month mark was when I really started to break down and feel really lonely.
Oh.
Grew up with a big family, tons of people,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly I'm in a dorm by myself. I like the independence and being able to do what I wanted to do, but yeah, it was really hard sometimes.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that is kind of like a parallel with sex work too, because sex work can also be quite isolating, especially like with your start doing it in secret, not really supposed to be doing it. But even as adults, a lot of us do this on the low because we have
Mm,
lives. I have a civilian job. A lot of other people have kids and families, and are married and stuff too, and people want to remain private. So it can be really, really hard to do that. But yeah, that's a lot of layers to go through when you're so young and stuff too. But hopefully, I mean, your parents, like your mom and your aunt, were there to hopefully support you and provide a bit of comfort when you're traveling and working abroad in Japan. So, I mean, that's good to hear. Going back to say like you're now starting to dive deeper into sex work, can you tell us about that and what that landscape looked like when you were starting to
yeah.
get in there?
Yeah, so what you just said, it's isolating, but I think that I went into it because I felt so lonely and I wanted some sort of connection. So I originally started on seeking arrangement, like so many people do,
Me
not knowing
too.
what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a lot of Splenda out there,
Yes.
it's rough. But I met someone decent and he told me about Universe Club, which is kind of like a matchmaking agent. That's what they call it, like a matchmaking agency.
Mm,
I mean, it's not explicitly um, like an escort agency or anything like that, but it's very much implied. The men who join pay like $5,000 or something. It's probably more
mm,
now to join, and they can date who's ever like on the roster inside of the agency. So there's different
mm.
tiers. There's like basic, gold, platinum, and then like black. The company like categorizes, I mean, it's kind of gross, but they categorize like the women in those categories. And like the more
Oh,
one of them
wow.
guys like pays or he has a better job, he can access more people and like ask them on a date. So that was how I started.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, couple things first. Talk to us about your experience on seeking arrangement, and like, were you only on essay when you were in Japan? And like, how was that experience for you? Because I also was on essay for a long time in my sugar baby days. I have thoughts and feelings. I have not done a sugar baby episode because I have really strong feelings about that portion of my life that I'm not sure if I want to get into. But I'm happy
Mhm.
to talk about like what that experience is for you, or what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. So I'm the first person I met on there was very he was very old and we just wanted to go out to dinner, which is like rare. I know that that's what some sugar babies say that they do. I'm sure some people do that, but that's not like super common, right? Like most people are going to
Mm-hmm.
expect something more.
Yeah.
So I met him. He was very nice, and he kind of like told me a bit about that world. But then I met a few other people, usually like Western, like white guys who like lived in Japan or were visiting, and the
Mhm.
experiences were they were hit or miss. Like there's no screening for them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I had a few experience. Like I had one time, this guy he invited me to Kyoto, which is far from Tokyo. You have to take a train there. So he sent me like a little deposit. So I'm like, okay, I'm taking the day off of school. And I just met him like in his hotel for like 20, 30 minutes and he gave me like 2 grand. So I was like, wow, like and I didn't even have like I don't know if I can say it on the show.
Yeah. And if you want to edit this part out, let me know.
Okay, yeah. I didn't even have like PIV then because I had never had PIV then. So I just did
Mm,
like other stuff and I don't know. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So
yeah.
I think a lot of us have that when we're new, these like kind of random streaks of luck, and we think it's always going to be like that.
It's not.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
We had some gems back then, but there was a lot of rocks in the pile
Yes.
too. Yeah, I hear you with that. And like, yeah, talking to you with your comment about screening or lack thereof screening, I also had a very similar experience to you as well. I mean, I laugh about it now. It's not really funny, but like, yeah, safety. I don't know. I felt like, when you're young, you're kind of invincible and like, you're like, oh, it's fine. I have my whole life ahead of me. I could get to make these choices. Some of those choices weren't so great. I'm not super proud of those choices too. But yeah, like screening was like zero on seeking arrangement. There was only so much that you can do. Like I had my own ways of like quote unquote screening. I tried to do like a Zoom call with whoever I was meeting up with or some kind of video FaceTime chat as like, okay, like, yeah, like I'll Google you and find your LinkedIn and stuff like that. But I think that was like the most of my extent. And that's hard for you because like you are in a foreign country as well. So it's like you don't even really have roots, like permanent roots in that country. And like, if something were to go wrong, like who would you go to? Did you have anyone that you could even talk to about that? Like,
Yeah, so I had a friend circle that were all sex workers, and it's really common for just young women to move to Tokyo, whether they be foreign or Japanese, to do sex work just because it's everywhere there. It's pervasive in the culture. So
hmm.
I did have a lot of friends that were doing it that I could talk to.
Oh, yeah. Well, tell us about that, like how it's kind of like embedded in the culture too. Cause like, it's interesting. Japan is such a very interesting place because you have this like innocent, kawaii type facade on one side of the coin, and then you have
Yeah.
the stereotypical like hentai and like submissive. And I hate even saying these stereotypes, but unfortunately they are stereotypes and they have to be addressed. But like that side of the coin as well, and like that they could be freaky, whatever these stereotypes are. But talk to us a little bit about like the culture there and like how sex work is pretty pervasive over there.
Yeah, so there's a statistic that I heard a few years ago, and I'm not sure if it's even still accurate or what it was. And a lot of people might have heard this, but it was something like 1 out of 10 of like women in Japan like have done some form of sex work. And I think because women are so marginalized in Japanese society, that they have this industry as kind of like, well, we'll give you this, kind of thing. And I mean, I think that the work conditions are better because it is everywhere, right? Like you've been to Tokyo, right? You said?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been a
Yeah,
couple
like
times.
yeah, it's everywhere. Like there's little shops and places, and I mean, I was even in Kobe earlier this year, and I remember it turned like 6 p.m. at night, and all you see is a bunch of girls with their beautiful hair and high heels, and they're going to work at the hostess club, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just so much a part of the culture. I think also because of Buddhism, I've heard that like in Buddhist, more like collective thinking societies, they would rather
Mhm.
like blame the society rather than like blame like an individual woman.
Oh, that's so very true. Like, and that is, yeah, I would find that. is very apparent in a lot of like East Asian cultures. It's very collective, as you would say. It's collective way of thinking versus in the West, it's very individualistic and like every man or every woman for themselves. It's very, very different way of thinking for sure. But going back to what you were saying too about the culture, I remember, yeah, it was a video that I commented on that it popped up on my Twitter. This is the whole thing that sparked this whole conversation. And I was like, do you want to be on the show? But I remember, wasn't it like a video that you had posted about women and their thoughts and feelings about like what is like quote unquote cheating and if that's going to be if that is acceptable. And I think like that video clip, what like yeah, sure it's edited and whatever, but like there was a bunch of Japanese women that were interviewed saying like, oh yeah, like if my husband wanted to sleep with someone, then I'd be okay with it. Like that's not really cheating or something like that. Like I can't remember exactly the whole detail about the video, but yeah, did you find that like those attitudes were expressed in Japan? Because I feel like some people might have their own assumptions and feelings about women in Japan, period.
Yeah, I think that they very much have a culture of don't ask, don't tell about certain
Mm-hmm.
things. So I definitely think that if it's not out in the open, some people just think that they don't really care too much about it. I'm sure, like, of course, women may be angry or mad, but if you have a society where women might not have as much autonomy if they're like going to be a single mom or something, then of course they're going to like look to the side or not really care if their husband steps out. And it's even better if it is a sex worker because it's like, oh, there's no feelings involved. He's not going to leave me and my child homeless, so he can do
Yeah.
that over there. And, I'll be here as the wife later. I think it's that kind of mindset.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you I don't know if you're on TikTok, but you see a lot of those videos too. I mean, they're definitely more humorous. But like I know there's a lot of follower people that I follow on TikTok too, that are abroad, not just in Japan, but like talking about like rich housewives in Dubai, and it's just like a running joke, like, oh, like I come home and see my husband like fucking some other woman. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna turn the other way and pretend I didn't see that. And you guys have a great time over there.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, very much reinforcing that don't ask, don't tell type of mentality for sure. You mentioned host bars, which I definitely want to talk to you about later on. But going back to your conversation, you met this gentleman, and he told you about, was it called the Universal Club or Universe Club?
Universe Club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's interesting. Let's talk a bit more about that because I have never heard of that before. And you're talking about there's different tiers and there's different like girls that are available at each level. Can you tell us a bit more in detail, like what those tiers are, if you can remember?
Yeah, so the setup of it is you sign up with them. They have an office somewhere in Tokyo. You go to their office, they interview you, they see you in person, how you look, and then they take pictures of you in their office and they assign you a tier. So I was told by like a friend who also knew the guy I knew from SA that show like my idol stuff like show like a newspaper clipping because they'll put you like in a higher tier.
Oh,
And
wow.
I knew that like famous porn stars or whatever, they were like in the highest tier. I think they also ranked people by looks. I heard in the past that it was like the staff asked for like dating the girls or something. I don't really know, but basically they
Oh my
just rank
gosh.
you by
Oh
a
my
lot of
god.
factors.
Oh my gosh. And I'm sure like no one knows exactly what those factors are.
Yeah.
That is so interesting, for lack of a better word. Oh gosh. So you were placed in one of these tiers. Like tell us about your experience there. Was it like, yeah, tell us about that. Like you go on dates with said men that are paying X amount of dollars for whatever subscription that they have. But yeah, tell us about your experience there.
Yeah, so they essentially act as a matchmaker, and the person goes on their website and says, I want to go on a date with her, can you see if she's available when I'm having my business trip to Tokyo or something. They had a lot of Japanese men as well as like international people from the West. And
Mhm.
you say like, yeah, I'm available that day. And they give you like a little information about him, like his job, his background. You go and meet him, and there's already like an amount on your profile that's kind of like a secret code of like how much money you want for just the date. And they also have
Oh,
like on your profile too, they say like A means you never have sex ever, B means like, you know, after we get to know each other, and so on. So you can assign
interesting.
that, and then that's basically how you can just date the person privately after that. So I did meet some like good long-term clients that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's interesting. I mean, I guess that's one way of like exercising your boundaries. Like, did you ever have a say? Were you able to ever refuse a client, or like, how did that work? Because it almost sounds like a broth, like the legal brothel system in Nevada, where it's like the lineup, and then the guy can kind of choose a girl. But I guess this sounds like it's almost maybe like a digital thing, and then he meets you in person, and then you kind of go from there. Like, very, very,
Yeah.
very different. Yeah, tell us about that. Like, if you're able to like say no to anything, or like
Oh
that, did that ever
yeah, I can
happen?
definitely.
Like, mhm.
Yeah, I definitely like said no. Like there was one person who I met who I just got like a bad vibe from him, and I was like, "Oh, I need to go to the store really quick." And he like gave me like a little bit of cash, and I just left, and I told them, like I texted them like, "Hey, I got a bad vibe from this guy. I don't want to see him." And it was fine. I thought they would
Mm,
be mad like, "Oh, you took money from him and, nothing. You didn't do anything." But yeah, it was completely fine. Um
mhm. Wow.
Yeah, they were pretty nice. I'm trying to think more about that experience. They were kind of out of the picture after they introduced you for like the first date. After that, they had no like involvement. So they really were marketing
Ah,
themselves as like a dating,
yeah,
a matchmaking.
matchmaking
It's like SA,
service.
but like screened kind of.
If yeah, if they even do any screening for those guys, because we don't
Yeah,
even know that
yeah,
either. anyone can si-
yeah,
well, anyone can sign up if they pay the fee, whatever, $5,000 or whatever the fee was. But
yeah, definitely.
in terms, I guess, because like you were after that is just like a free reign. Because I was going to ask about like safety and stuff too. Like, um, I guess we can't really talk about that because they just leave you alone after that. And yeah, we don't know if there's a screening process at all for the
Um,
clients.
I'm not sure. I think they have the same interview process for the clients. Like they have to go to the office and like meet them. I'm sure if they got some big wig CEO or whatever paying like a certain amount and a girl said, "Hey, this guy did X, Y, and Z," I'm sure they probably would be like, "Okay, you don't have to see him again," but they might put him on other dates with other girls or something, you know? So
Mm,
I'm not saying that they were like perfect saints or anything like that. Um, but yeah, they did
yeah.
screen, but that doesn't mean that the person's going to be safe either.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Nothing honestly can guarantee safety, unfortunately, in this world, which is a sad reality. But so okay, so that you had an interesting experience at this universal club, um, and which you got some clients out of that, which sounds really fun. Talking about more of like your sugar baby life too, and talking about like sugar baby culture. I know that you mentioned to me before off the air that there are like sugar baby clubs and stuff like that in Japan. Did you want to go into that?
Yeah, so this is basically what I meant about like a sugar baby club. You mean like a physical they have like physical locations for something like this, but it's a
Oh.
lot less white glove service.
Mm-hmm.
So there are like date cafes, and they're essentially, I mean, this one is definitely more like a lineup. Like it's essentially like you sign up as a member, like girls can sign up for free, guys can pay like whatever amount to sign up as a new member. Girls go into this, or I should say women, sorry. Women
That's
go
okay.
into a room where um it's pink. They're like got snacks, they got pop, they got cakes. They have like computers. They have, and then there's like a one-way mirror.
Okay.
So you can only see yourself and like the other girls in the room. So you just go in there, and then guys are like on the other side. So it kind of feels like a zoo in some way. Yeah, it's
Oh my
very
god. Here's me
disconcerting.
all of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then the guy can like pick you and ask to talk to you. the staff comes out, tells you, hey, this person wants to talk to you. You go to a private room together, and then you talk and you decide what you want to do. He pays the cafe like a little bit of money, and then you leave, and then whatever you do is your business. So,
Mm, interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Couple observations here. So, like, first of all, the zoo comment. I think that's hilarious. Almost reminds me of like peep show clubs. I mean, those are becoming more and more extinct. I actually don't even know of any more peep show clubs that exist anymore, but kind of on a similar aspect too, but not explicit at that point, right? Like you're just being on display. The guys can kind of view which girls he wants and then request for you. um, when they're paying the fee at this point, like the gentleman or the client is paying a fee, is the club getting, are you getting a part of that? Or is that all the clubs? And then after you leave, then it's negotiated on your own rate and stuff like that too? Or how does that structure work?
While you're in the room, the like private cubby little rooms that they have, you can negotiate your rate there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's still within the realms and the safety of the club, but you're not conducting your business at the club. Or are you
No.
conducting at
So
the club?
you
No.
have some like barter, you can barter or like, I don't want this or that. Clients will ask what specific things like you are fine with. Some people just want to
Hmm.
go to dinner or something. Obviously, like a lot of people want more than that. And
Yeah.
then the fee that they pay the cafe is so small. I think it's like the equivalent of like $20. So they
Oh,
just pay the cafe
wow.
$20. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of
It's like a
odd.
cover charge.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a chain too. So they have like these all over
Really?
Tokyo. Yeah,
Wow. That's
it's a loophole.
yeah, totally a loophole for sure. I mean, with these date cafes, and this is like a little sidebar tangent thing. There's also a lot. I mean, there's a lot of cafes in general in Japan. So a lot when I'm talking about cafes, I'm talking about like maid cafes, princess cafes, there's robot cafes, there's owl cafes, there's like cat cafes, there's like a lot of all that stuff too. But talking about in comparison, date cafes, which has like a specific purpose, I'm curious to hear about what your thoughts are on maid cafes and like princess cafes and stuff too. So, and for those who haven't visited Japan or have not heard of this phenomena, basically they have these theme cafes that you can visit. There's food and well, the ones that I have visited do not have alcohol, and you're allowed to spend time and talk with these women that dress up as maids. They'll do a little show. You could kind of like pay them extra to spend more time for them to talk to you and stuff like that. But what are your thoughts on those style cafes? And I don't even know if there's a term for that, but like, what are your thoughts on those cafes? And would you consider some of that to be sex work? Because unfortunately, like a lot of these women are sexualized in these environments, or at least that's how I have perceived it and that's how I've looked at it. But would be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I am so glad you asked this because I'm a total nerd and I love maid cafes. And this is an interesting question. I actually think that the reason that the fans go to like like a sex work, like fuzoku is what they call it in Japan, compared
Mhm.
to a concept cafe, like a maid cafe, I think that there are different reasons. I think that they go to like a maid cafe because maybe they have some like they're shy about something or they're like ashamed of maybe how they look or they're not very confident, and it's kind of a safe space for them to talk with like a pretty girl or a pretty woman that's not gonna judge them or laugh at them, and it's just like a safe environment. A lot of these men, because I went just a few months ago when I went to Japan, I noticed a lot of them seem almost like children, like kind of stunted a little. Like they have like jobs and everything, but like maybe socially stunted. So I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of the appeal of it.
Yeah, like a judgment free zone. I also feel that because when I went to one of these, and this is like my first time in Tokyo ages ago, back in like 2012 or something, when I was like my first international trip abroad. Um, yeah, my observation there, and this is based on my own experience, like the men that I had seen there, it's a lot of single men, from what I might perceive as like perhaps a recluse, and that's a whole thing in Japan as well. Um, I don't I don't want to say loner type, but that is the vibe that I got. Sometimes like more nerdy type of people that might be a bit more shy, people that might be a bit more self-conscious about their looks, their personality, their interests and stuff like that. So I almost feel like, yeah, like there's a big companionship draw in Japan, and this can also cross into other cultures in Asia as well. It's a lot of you're paying for your time. Like as a client, you're paying for your time to spend with a very pretty girl and whatnot, and paying for a specific service and fantasy, and that is to make you feel good. It's almost like a confidence booster. And myself going to like a Prince cafe. There's also like butler cafes and stuff too. It's really fun, but also yeah, like a little confidence booster. And you're like, yes, my princess, and they'll like get you like your drinks and get you your food and stuff, and it's really fun. But yeah, like I feel companionship can be a large draw in Japan, not just for women, but also yeah, not only for men, but also for women as well, because there is a lot of loneliness um, in these large cities in Japan. At least that's from my own experience and what I've seen, and also what I've researched online. So, but anyways, side tangent over. Going back to you, Mina, and sorry, like, did you have comments about that as well? I'm just going off.
No, no, no. I totally appreciate it. Yeah, I just agree with you. Like, I think people are looking for connection. So all of this stuff makes sense.
Definitely. Definitely. So, I mean, going back to the date cafes. So, say yes. Say yes, you've been working at the date cafe. A person has gone and picked you, and then we're negotiating, and then you're off to wherever. Did you ever encounter any times that you might have felt unsafe, or like I know you mentioned earlier, like, hey, I got a bad vibe from this guy. I'm piecing out. I'm out of this place. But were there any situations where you might have felt unsafe when you were working as a sex worker in Japan?
Yes, definitely. Especially at the date cafes because I was so young. And
Mm-hmm.
I think people know that, like, if you're inexperienced, and obviously if you're a foreigner, you're vulnerable in another way.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely had some not great experiences there, which
Mm-hmm.
led me to finally work at the last place I worked. But I think the reason the experiences were so bad is because there's no filters, there's no screening really, other than just paying a small, like a cover charge to get in.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, like I feel like screening is a big North American Western thing. Because I even
Mm.
had a couple episodes earlier. Oh, I guess at this time of this episode being released, I did have Nina Lira, who's another escort, who came on the show to talk about travel, international touring in Europe, especially. And she's like, "Oh, screening deposits, like good luck. That stuff does not exist over here. You know, a lot of you North Americans wanting to tour in Europe, you have to get off your high horse. It's a very completely different culture, and it sounds like it might be similar in Japan, at least coming from what I'm gathering from your experience. Like that's
Yeah,
not really a thing."
yeah. So my understanding, at least in America and maybe Canada too, that screening is mostly for the police. Like, you don't want to meet cops. It's obviously for like your personal safety too. Like, you want to know
Hmm.
that this person has references and stuff. But I know a lot of it is like law enforcement. They don't do
Hmm.
stings like that in Japan. For and
Hmm.
I Yeah, they don't do things like that in Japan. So I think that that's also a big reason. Like, the cops aren't arresting sex workers.
Right.
Um, yeah. And
What's
I
the
had a
legal?
time.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go
sorry, go
ahead.
on.
No, go
You were
ahead.
going to ask me the legality, so sure.
Yeah, legality. Yeah, for sure.
So after World War II, America basically made Japan change their constitution or change their laws around sex work, and essentially everything is illegal. Everything is legal except PIV, between
Hmm.
unknown persons. Like, it literally says that. So technically, if you talk and meet someone and talk for 5 minutes, they are not an unknown person, and it's not illegal at that point. Or
Mm,
you can have shops like brothels or agencies that advertise other services than PIV. So that's really popular as well.
right. Right. And I know like mentioning in some, like off the air too, you said it's kind of like a gray area too, because it also depends on if you're visiting what kind of visa you might have. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yes, so visa is also something that comes up for foreigners. Um, if you want to work at a establishment in Japan, they need to see that you either have a spouse visa or you have like a long permanent resident visa, which you would get after living in Japan for like 10 years or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So most foreigners are not working exactly legally, but
Mm,
I don't know anybody that has been arrested for this specific thing. It's usually like if someone is arrested, it's usually because they like overstayed their visa and they did something else, or like the hostess clubs because it's such a visible kind of place. I know that they've been raided. Excuse me, they've been raided like a few times because they might have a lot of women from like the Philippines or like Eastern Europe, and
right.
they don't have the right type of visa, and they might like be deported or something. But it's never like actually for like sex work. Like if you just met a client and then got money from him, I don't. The police don't really care about that as much.
Mhm. Yeah, and also it's a good thing to note as well. My friend Anthony Joe, who is owner of Fox Digital, who made my website, mentioned that in the beginning of the show. He lived extensively in Japan for a long time. He's also half Japanese too, but I know that he had comments about this too. He has thoughts and feelings. For those who are wondering about like strip clubs and brothels and all that stuff, a lot of the adult scene is run by the Yakuza, which is Japan's organized crime, basically
Mm,
gangs, the mob, and stuff like that too. So I really also want to say that as a podcaster, I want to have a certain degree of responsibility because, of course, people might
mm,
come into this episode be like, oh my God, I want to work in Japan too. So a lot of that is run by them. So he also wanted me to mention like you because they're run by the gangs, like the yakuza won't help, police might not help you, especially if you're a foreigner. um your safety nets here in North America, like you have roots, you have safety nets, may not be the same when you are abroad. So I just want to go out and say that as well, because I just don't want anyone thinking that this is, I never want to go out saying like sensationalizing anything at all. And this is why I'm like trying to get some really real accounts from yourself. And I know you have a story that you want to also talk about too, with your own dealings with the police in Japan as well. Are you comfortable going into that?
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Yakuza connections in that industry in Japan, so people shouldn't take it too lightly. For me,
Mm-hmm.
I was leaving a day cafe once, and this is when I was 18, 19 years old. I
Mm-hmm.
was very thin, like almost pretty much underweight then. So maybe people thought I was younger than like 18. Like when you're that age, like you could sometimes go either way. And they saw me walking with this man, and I was in Kabukicho, which is
Mm-hmm.
like in Shinjuku. And the cops came out and they just started questioning me. And I like immediately showed them like my visa, and I'm like, I'm here legally. I'm here. They're like, no, we don't care about that. Like, how old are you? So
Mm.
I was like, I'm 18. And they said, we're going to call your parents. Like, you shouldn't be out here doing that.
Oh
So they asked to call
man.
my parents. I was like, my parents aren't in Japan.
Oh
So
my
they just
god.
kind of lectured me and said, like, your father would not want you to do this. Go home.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
weird experience, but it could have gone a lot worse.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you contrast that with an experience here, and I'm sorry, I'm here in Canada, but if you contrast that with like an experience in the States where sex work is criminalized, that could have gone in a completely different
Yeah.
direction. You might have just gotten arrested
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, that's really scary. Were you scared at the time? If you
I
can
was like
remember?
I was shaking, crying. I was so frightened. I felt like so ashamed, but
Yeah.
I was happy that um nothing happened. Like they didn't call my school or anything like that, and it seemed to be fine. And then I told a friend, and she actually had the same thing happen too, where she was younger. Like when she was younger,
Mm-hmm.
she was foreign, but she said they asked to check her age, and then they just let her go.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's nice that they're kind of like looking out
Yeah, it
for
is
young
nice.
girls. Yeah, in that kind of sense. Um, but yeah, I mean, I hope that you didn't have a lot of like close call type situations or anything that was really scary. I know that you are wanting to talk about delivery health agencies as well and why you started working for that for them. And I'm curious to know like what is that? And maybe you can go into that part of the conversation.
Yeah, so that's basically like an agency that will give you a dispatch to send you to like a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually have like a home base where all the workers just like a break room. You can just relax for a few hours or when you don't have work, and then they send you a text message and they tell you where to go. But it's a legal business in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and they have formal offices set up. So you check in the office every day, and then you go to like the other location where like the break room is. And I joined that after having like a few bad experiences with like the date cafe, as well as breaking up with like a boyfriend. So I just decided to do something different. I
Mm-hmm.
think they might have had a Yakuza affiliation, so definitely not suggesting you should get in that. I had some clients that actually were
Mm-hmm.
Yakuza, and it was kind of weird.
Yeah.
um, I like was gonna shower with them, which is kind of
Yeah.
like normal in Japan.
Yeah.
And the guy took off his shirt and he had these big tattoos that only like Yakuza have, like traditional tattoos. And I was
Right.
like, what do you do for work? And he just said, lots of stuff, you know. And then it was pretty normal. So I had a few
Yeah.
times people like that came in. But besides that, it was a pretty good experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's quite the varied experience that you had in sex work in Japan. It's been really, really eye opening, and I'm so happy that you're able to come onto the show and speak to us about that. I know that we didn't really get to talk too much about host bars or hostess clubs. That's really popular in Asia and in general. And as to what I was saying earlier about really the emphasis on companionship, that's a whole thing too. But I wonder if you had any comments about hostess clubs in Japan, or if you have a better definition than I do, that would be awesome.
Yeah, to me, it just seems like the modern day sort of geisha kind of
Mm,
experience. Like,
that's a good
it's
way of
more
putting it.
like an entertainer, like, she facilitates business because it's usually people going there with like their jobs. So she's there to like facilitate conversation and like get them to talk to one another. So
Hmm.
it's an interesting experience. I definitely think it's different than other types of work.
Yeah, and if you are interested, there's tons of stuff on hostess bars on TikTok. I've watched a lot of that, lots of stuff on YouTube. I can't speak too much about it because I don't know that much on it, but I just thought it's best to mention it in case anyone's curious about that kind of stuff as well. But did I miss anything, Amina? Is there anything else that you want to include in this conversation before we move it to some Q&A from the audience?
No, I think we talked about everything. I would just say if anybody's going to do this, like do like a lot. I wouldn't necessarily advise you to do it. I'm not telling anybody to do anything, but if you're dead set on doing it, obviously like be safe and um, know like what resources are out there for you.
Yeah, I mean, are there any, and this is a random question, I'm not sure if you would know, but are there any nonprofit organizations or any kind of sex work support networks or anything like that? Does that exist in Japan to your knowledge? I mean,
There
this is a
is
long time
squash
ago.
in Osaka.
Okay. In
Yeah.
Osaka. Good to know. I'll post these links in the show notes if anyone's curious as well. But thanks for sharing that. I mean, I know that there are some questions from the audience that came in that they would love for you to answer if you are comfortable answering them.
Sure, I am.
Yeah, it's that point of the show. So we'll just go through these questions here. There's a few that just came in. But the first one is I would love to know what strip clubs are like, if that's even a thing in Japan, or what are the most popular forms of sex work there?
Cool. Interesting question. Yeah, it's not as much of a thing there because there's like hostess clubs, which kind of takes care of like the talking side, and then there's the Fuzoku, like I said, like delivery health, that is like the other side of that stuff. I know that some clubs in Roppongi that have like foreign people working there do also have like strippers working there too. So there are like some clubs, but it's not like the US.
Yeah, it's very different. And like, I know that there's a lot of great pole dancers there, like non strippers that are there, and a lot of like the nightclubs they have poles, not employing any strippers there too. But in case you're interested in that, that's a big thing, and they're very talented. The next question here is there more emphasis on various massage services versus other forms of sex work in Japan?
Um, that's basically all that's legal. Kind of like the delivery
Mhm.
health. That's basically what they offer, which is
Mhm.
basically like the massage and usually, hand service or something like that. So that,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha, yeah. And I forgot to even ask too with the delivery services as well. Like, is there any kind of like, I know, I mean, probably not, but is there any kind of screening for that as well? Or it's just like, this is where you're supposed to go and you go? Is there like a buddy system or anything like that? Or is it very much independent?
It depends. I think some higher end places probably do like a lot more screening. Yeah, it just depends. There's like a wide price range. I think
Mm.
some that are more maybe not as expensive, they want to just get as many people as possible, so they don't like necessarily do screening. But again, if you tell them like, hey, I don't want to see this person, or even I've had times where like I messaged them once I got to the place, they're like on standby. They have like staff like in an office nearby, so they can come and help you if something goes bad.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah. Sorry for forgetting to ask about that. It's just,
Oh
yeah,
no,
there's a
it's
lot of
fine.
things going on. And the last question here is, are there any BDSM slash kink slash cosplay service type clubs in Japan that you know of?
There definitely are. I know that there's a bar in Ginza that's like a hostess bar, but all of the people working there are Doms. So I've never been
Ooh.
there, but it seems really interesting. Yeah, I'd love to go. I follow their Instagram. I forgot the name.
If you find out
Yeah,
later, let
and
me
then
know.
yeah, I definitely will send it to you. And then there is like I forget the name of it. Maybe image clubs is what they call it. So they have
Mhm.
like different themes. So some of them have are just like delivery health, but it's like a dominatrix
Oh,
or
that's
just
exciting.
health. So the people go there, come to you. You don't like go to their place, and basically that's what it is.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And were there any like cosplay type clubs or anything like that as well that you know of, or that's just not a thing?
I'm pretty sure that there is, but usually a lot of places the fans can ask, or not fans, sorry, the client can ask for cosplay. So they
Mm,
probably like they have like a stock and you can take it with you. But a lot of them they do have some that are like themed like cosplay places.
yeah. And like what I mentioned earlier too, there's like specific themed bars. Like I went to an Alice in Wonderland cafe, and you could take like Polaroids with like all the people that dress up there and stuff too. Not exactly like cosplay, but I'm sure I'm sure stuff like that exists. I'm sure there is like other themed like bars and cafes and stuff like that too. But I have not been there since 2017, so it's been a minute.
No, no, you're definitely right. Like I know that there's a married woman themed delivery health one. So all the
Oh,
women are married. But then I think there was a scandal that broke out because they found out like half the women weren't actually married.
yeah, because like, how are they really gonna know? Like, come on.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Oh my gosh. I mean, this has been fantastic. Oh, I forgot to ask you about Mint Stars. We have time. If you have time, we can talk about Mint Stars if you want to talk about that, your platform that you're working on.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words. So I'm head of creator engagement, and basically our platform is a platform that creators can upload their content to, and we don't take any fees from the creators. We take 5% from
Ooh.
the customer, the fan, and creators can set their own prices, anything they want. It's subscription based, but we also have a clip store. We're still in
Ooh.
beta, so we have a wait list, but we're growing really quick. Like last month, we doubled in subscribers. So we have like a couple thousand subscribers now and only like less than 200 creators. So if anybody's interested in
Wow.
joining, please reach out to me.
Me. And we'll
Yes.
definitely we'll definitely plug the link in here as well in the show notes. If anyone else is interested, more than welcome to have happy to connect you with Amina. Or actually better yet, since we are at the end of the show, Amina, what is the best way for people to find you if you want to be found?
Yes. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter is at Amina_IO. I'm on there far too much, so I will see your message if you message me.
Oh man, this has been so great. It's been a fantastic episode and just like making me nerd out with all the things. And I have had such an enjoyable conversation with you, Amina. Thank you so much. For everyone else that's listening at home, it is new episodes every single Sunday, dropping at midnight Pacific Standard Time. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm usually very active on X/Twitter. You can find me there at Stripped by Sia. And of course, I'm also on Instagram. Please follow because, of course, my account got suspended. It's gone now forever. So I have a new account. It's Stripped by Sia Podcast. And if you're interested in Patreon, it's patreon.com/stripped by Sia. And of course, last but not least, if you're wanting to be on the show, a lot of it is invite only. But if I love pitches, I get a lot of pitches. Pitch yourself to be on the show. I'd love to get your talk points, things that and topics that you might feel passionate about. It's strippedbysia.com, and you can fill in the booking form there if you're interested in potentially developing an episode with me. So that's it for today, Amina. It was so great to have you on. I am so excited to just I'm very like overwhelmed right now because I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of stuff to to think about, but very interesting indeed. And thank you so much for sharing with us your experience with working in Japan with sex worker. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. Graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Dabrin.